My diary was lying on my boss's desk, and I was standing in front of him like a criminal waiting for his sentence. Zayden Cross picked up that brown leather diary, and I knew he had read every single page, every dirty thought I had written about him, every scenario I had imagined on my bed at night. Everything was now inside his mind, and he was staring at me like I had committed some unforgivable sin. "When did you write all this?" Zayden's voice was so calm it scared me. A calm voice meant he was boiling inside. I pulled my hands behind my back, trying to hide them because they were shaking. "Sir, that I can explain." "Explain?" Zayden threw the diary in front of me. It fell near my feet. "What will you explain, Charlie? That you wrote about how desperate you are for my touch? That you imagined what I would do with you?" There was fire in his eyes. But maybe it wasn't just anger, maybe there was something else too. But I couldn't understand because my mind had already shut down. I picked up the diary, looking at its cover that now seemed to be judging me. This had all happened by accident. Last night I stayed late at the office, finishing work, and when I went home I realized my diary was missing. I thought maybe I had forgotten it at home. But no, it was with Zayden. The cleaning staff must have picked it up and placed it on his desk, thinking it was some work journal. And Zayden, he read it. Zayden sat back in his chair, but his eyes wouldn't leave me. "You know I can fire you right now. This is a company policy violation. Workplace harassment." "I never harassed you." My voice came out for the first time, and it was a bit too loud. "This was just my personal diary. I never thought I would show it to anyone. But I read it." Zayden cut me off. He tightened his jaw. "And now I can't forget what my assistant has written about me. I knew it was over. My job, my respect, everything. I just wanted the ground to open up and swallow me." But Zayden said something I never expected. "Starting tomorrow, you'll work directly with me. Every project, every meeting. Understood?" I was shocked. "What?" "You heard me," Zayden said, his fingers drumming on his desk. "If you want to keep this job, then you'll have to stay close to me now. So I can watch you, understand you, because I can't understand why you wrote all this." My heart did a strange jump. Was this punishment or something else? I didn't know. I just knew that my life had become even more complicated. The weight of his words pressed down on my chest like a physical force. Working directly with Zayden meant no buffer, no escape, no hiding behind emails or third-party communications. It meant being in his orbit every single day, breathing the same air, occupying the same space where all my fantasies had taken root and grown wild in the pages of that cursed diary. I wanted to ask him why. Why not just fire me and be done with it? Why this elaborate punishment that would torture both of us? But the words stuck in my throat like broken glass. Instead, I just nodded, my voice barely a whisper when I finally managed to say, "Yes." Zayden's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those gray-blue eyes of his. Something I couldn't quite identify. Curiosity, anger, or maybe something darker. Something that mirrored the forbidden thoughts I had poured into my diary during lonely nights, when the office was empty and I allowed myself to imagine impossible things. "You can go now," he said, his tone dismissive, but his gaze held me in place for a moment longer than necessary. "And Charlie?" I paused at the door, my hand already on the handle. My escape so close. "Yet, don't even think about running. You signed a contract, and I always collect what's owed to me." The way he said it sent shivers down my spine. Not from fear, but from something far more dangerous. Because buried underneath the professional threat was an undertone that felt almost possessive. Like he wasn't just talking about work obligations. I walked out of his office on trembling legs, feeling the eyes of my coworkers burning into my back. Did they know? Had Zayden told anyone? My paranoia spiraled as I made my way to my desk, my mind replaying every humiliating word of our conversation. The diary still felt heavy in my hands, even though Zayden had given it back to me before I left. "Keep it," he had said, "since you clearly needed it for something." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about tomorrow, about working directly under Zayden's supervision, about how I would survive being that close to him every single day. The man who now knew my deepest, most shameful secrets. The man who had appeared in my dreams more times than I could count. The man whose rejection should have destroyed me, but instead had somehow pulled me deeper into his world. I opened the diary one last time, reading through the entries with fresh eyes. The words looked different now, knowing that Zayden had read them. Every description of his hands, his voice, his rare smile, every fantasy about staying late at the office, about accidental touches turning into something more. Every desperate confession of how much I wanted him, needed him, craved even just a moment of his attention. And now I had his attention. All of it. But not in the way I had ever imagined. This wasn't a romantic dream come true. This was a nightmare wrapped in expensive suits and cold professionalism. This was punishment designed to break me, to make me quit on my own so Zayden wouldn't have to deal with the mess of firing someone for something so personal, so inappropriate. But I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. If Zayden wanted to torture me by keeping me close, then I would endure it. I would show him that I was stronger than he thought, more professional than my diary suggested. I would prove that those words were just fantasies, nothing more than the desperate imaginings of someone who had been lonely for too long. Even if it was a lie, even if every moment near him would be agony, even if I knew that working directly with Zayden Cross would either destroy me completely or change everything forever. As I finally drifted off to sleep, my last thought was of Zayden's eyes, the way they had looked at me in his office. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle, like I was something unexpected that had disrupted his perfectly ordered world. And somewhere in the darkness of my exhausted mind, a dangerous hope flickered to life. Because angry as he had been, disgusted as he should have been, Zayden hadn't thrown me out. He had pulled me closer, and I couldn't decide if that terrified me or thrilled me more. The first week felt like Zayden was deliberately torturing me. He challenged me on every little thing, made me revise presentations over and over again, tightened deadlines until they were almost impossible to meet. And worst of all, he never smiled. He didn't smile much before either, but now his face had turned to stone, as if he wanted to prove that I meant nothing special to him, as if the diary had made no difference at all. But there was something strange. He wasn't ignoring me anymore. Before, he barely paid attention to me, just gave orders and moved on. But now his eyes followed me everywhere. When I went to get coffee, I could feel him watching. When I talked to someone, I could sense his gaze on me. It felt like an obsession, and I was losing my mind. On Wednesday, he invited me to lunch, at an actual restaurant. Just the two of us. I thought it might be a trap, but I couldn't refuse. When we sat down, Zayden pushed the menu aside and looked straight at my face. "There was one line in your diary," he began. "Zayden's hands distract me the moment I see them. Is that true?" My face burned hot. I looked down at my plate. "Sir, please." "Please what?" Zayden leaned forward slightly. "I want to know, you've been working with me for years and you kept all this hidden. Why?" How could I tell him I was scared? That I knew these feelings weren't acceptable? That I didn't want to lose my job? Because you're straightforward, professional. And I'm nobody. Zayden took a long breath. "You think I'm judging you? Aren't you?" I finally looked into his eyes. Those gray-blue eyes were so intense I got lost in them immediately. Zayden tightened his jaw, then said, "I'm confused, Charlie. Your diary showed me a lot, and I want to understand if all this is real or just your imagination." Real. That word echoed in my mind. Was he asking if I still wanted him? Because the answer was crystal clear. Yes. I still wanted him, maybe even more than before. But how could I say that? I don't know what you want to hear," I said quietly. Zayden picked up his glass, took a sip, then looked at me again. "The truth. I want to hear the truth. The truth." If I told the truth, would he accept it? Or would he finally fire me? It was a gamble, and I was afraid to take the risk. The restaurant around us buzzed with the lunch crowd, people laughing and talking about normal things. Normal lives. Meanwhile, I sat across from my boss who held all my secrets in his hands, waiting for me to confess feelings that could destroy everything I had worked for. "The truth is complicated," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. I watched as Zayden's fingers traced the rim of his glass. Those same fingers I had described in embarrassing detail in my diary. Strong, elegant, with prominent veins that I found inexplicably attractive. God. Even now I couldn't stop noticing. "Try me," Zayden said, his voice low and commanding. The same voice that made everyone in the office jump to attention. the same voice that had starred in too many of my late-night thoughts. I took a breath, deciding that maybe partial honesty was the only way forward. Everything I wrote, it wasn't meant to hurt you or make you uncomfortable. It was my way of processing feelings I knew I couldn't act on. Writing it down made it feel less real, less dangerous, like keeping it contained on paper meant it wouldn't spill out into my actual life. But it did spill out, Zayden pointed out, and there was something in his tone I couldn't quite place. The moment I read it, it became real. You can't unring that bell, Charlie. I know, I admitted, feeling shame wash over me again. I'm sorry. I never meant for you to see it. I never meant for any of this to happen. Zayden was quiet for a long moment, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Stop apologizing, he finally said. What's done is done. What I want to know is what happens now. What do you mean? I mean, Zayden leaned back in his chair, but his eyes never left mine. You've created a situation where we both know something that changes the dynamic between us. Your feelings are out in the open. But what about actions? What do you want to happen from here? The question caught me off guard. Was he really asking what I thought he was asking? Or was this another test, another way to see if I would cross a line so he could justify getting rid of me? I want to keep my job, I said carefully. I want to prove that I'm professional, that I can work with you without making things awkward or inappropriate. The diary was private for a reason. Those thoughts don't have to affect how we work together. Except they already do. Zayden countered. Every time you look at me now, I wonder if you're thinking about what you wrote. Every time we're alone in my office, I remember the scenarios you described. You've made it impossible for me to see you as just my assistant anymore. Charlie, that's what you don't seem to understand. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Then what do you want from me? Tell me what I need to do to fix this. Zayden's expression shifted, something almost vulnerable flickering across his features before the mask slid back into place. I don't know if it can be fixed. I don't know if I want it to be fixed. The words hung between us like a confession, dangerous and electric. Before I could process what he meant, Zayden stood up abruptly. We should get back to the office. We have that meeting with the investors at 3. Just like that, the moment shattered. Professional Zayden was back, all business and cool efficiency. But I had seen that flicker of something else, that brief crack in his armor, and it changed everything. The rest of the week continued in the same pattern. Zayden pushed me harder than ever, demanding perfection in every task, but there were moments, brief fleeting moments, when his hand would brush against mine as he handed me a file, when his gaze would linger a second too long, when his voice would drop to that low register that sent shivers down my spine. It was torture of the sweetest kind, because now I knew I wasn't imagining it. Zayden was affected too. The diary hadn't just exposed my feelings. It had awakened something in him that he was trying desperately to control. And I found myself wondering how long either of us could maintain this pretense before something finally broke. Zayden had carved out a permanent place in my life. He wasn't just my boss anymore. He was everywhere, in my thoughts, in my dreams, and literally in my workspace. He had his cabin redesigned so my desk would be inside his office, with glass walls, which meant I was always in his line of sight, and he was always in mine. On Fridays everyone left early, but Zayden and I stayed late. Extra work, we claimed, but the truth was we talked more than we worked. He asked me personal things about my family, my hobbies, my past relationships, and I told him because this was the first time someone had shown genuine interest in me, real interest. One night, I was in his cabin organizing reports. Zayden was sitting in his chair, looking at his laptop screen, but I could feel his attention was on me. I tried to ignore it, but when he suddenly asked, "How long have you been single?" my hand froze. 2 years, I answered without looking at him. Why? I was a bit shocked. This question was personal, very personal, because I didn't want anyone else. Silence. Then Zayden turned his chair around directly facing me. What do you mean? I finally gathered the courage to look at him. I mean that as long as you're in my head, no one else can take that space. No expression appeared on Zayden's face, but something sparked in his eyes. He stood up and came closer to me. So close I could smell his cologne, woody and fresh. The same scent I had described in my diary. The same scent that always distracted me. "You're dangerous, Charlie," Zayden said softly. "You know that, right?" "Dangerous how?" My voice was almost a whisper. "Because you make me think about things I don't want to think about." Zayden raised his hand, and for a second I thought he would touch me. But he didn't. He pulled his hand back and turned toward his chair. "You can go," he said, that cold professionalism returning to his voice. I was confused. What just happened? Did he almost... I didn't say anything, just grabbed my bag and walked out. But when I reached home, my heart was still racing. Because I knew something was changing. Zayden was feeling it too. I wasn't crazy. The glass walls of his office became both a blessing and a curse. I could see everything he did, and he could watch my every move. Sometimes I would catch him staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Not anger anymore, but something deeper, something more complicated. Other times he would deliberately avoid looking my way, as if forcing himself to maintain distance. Our late-night work sessions became a ritual. The office would empty out, leaving just the two of us in that glass box with the city lights twinkling outside. Zayden started sharing more about himself during these hours. I learned that he hated coffee but drank it anyway because it was expected. That he had a younger sister he was fiercely protective of. That he played piano when he was stressed, though he never performed for anyone. "Why do you stay late every Friday?" I asked him one evening. Genuinely curious. "You're the boss. You could leave whenever you want." Zayden looked up from his laptop, and for a moment I saw something raw in his expression. "Maybe I don't want to go home to an empty apartment," he admitted. "Maybe I like the company." The admission hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. Was he talking about me specifically, or just the general presence of another person? I didn't dare ask for clarification. As weeks passed, the boundaries between us grew increasingly fuzzy. Zayden started bringing me coffee in the mornings, always remembering exactly how I liked it. 2 sugars, light cream. He would leave sticky notes on my desk with random observations or inside jokes from our conversations. Once I found one that simply said, "You were right about the Mitchell account." Good instincts. These small gestures shouldn't have meant so much, but they did, because they showed that Zayden was paying attention, that he valued my input, that maybe I was more than just an assistant whose diary he had accidentally read. But the tension was still there, simmering beneath every interaction. There were moments when we would reach for the same file and our fingers would touch, and the contact would last a fraction of a second too long. Times when he would lean over my shoulder to look at my computer screen, and I could feel the heat of his body behind me, smell that intoxicating cologne, and struggle to remember how to breathe normally. The worst was when we had to work on presentations together. Zayden would stand beside me, one hand braced on my desk, the other pointing at the screen. I would be acutely aware of how close he was, how if I turned my head just slightly, my face would be inches from his, how easy it would be to close that distance, to finally act on all those fantasies I had written down. But I never did, because despite the blurring lines, despite the late nights and personal conversations and lingering touches, Zayden was still my boss, and I was still the assistant who had written inappropriate things about him in a diary. The power dynamic was impossible to ignore, no matter how much I wanted to. One particular Friday night changed something fundamental between us. We had been working on a major pitch, and stress levels were high. Zayden had discarded his jacket hours ago, rolled up his sleeves, loosened his tie. He looked almost approachable like this, less like the intimidating CEO and more like just a man working late. "I'm exhausted," he announced suddenly, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "Let's take a break." We ordered food and ate in his office, sitting on the floor with our backs against the couch, because Zayden said he was tired of sitting in chairs. It felt surreal, this casual intimacy, like we were friends rather than boss and employee, like the diary had never happened and we were just two people who enjoyed each other's company. "Can I ask you something?" Zayden said after we had finished eating. "Sure," I replied, though my stomach tightened with apprehension. "Do you regret it? Writing the diary, I mean." Knowing that I read it, I thought about the question carefully. Did I regret it? Part of me was still mortified, still wished I could take it all back. But another part of me recognized that the diary had changed things between us in ways that weren't entirely bad. Sometimes I admitted honestly, but also, no. Because at least now I don't have to pretend around you. You know the worst thing about me and you didn't destroy me for it. That's more than I expected. Zayden was quiet for a long moment. You think that's the worst thing about you? Having feelings for someone? Having inappropriate feelings for my boss? I corrected. There's a difference. Maybe, Zayden said softly. Or maybe you're being too hard on yourself. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push, but something had shifted again. Some invisible line had been crossed. We were entering dangerous territory, and both of us knew it. The question was whether either of us had the strength to turn back. Monday morning felt different. Zayden arrived late, which never happened. He was always the first one in, even before me. But not today. When he finally showed up, his eyes were red, like he hadn't slept properly. He glanced at me briefly, then walked straight into his cabin without saying a word. I was concerned. Was he okay? Had I done something wrong? At lunchtime, I went to check on him. I knocked on his door. He said come in, but when I entered he was standing by the window with his hands in his pockets, lost in thought. Sir, are you all right? I asked carefully. Zayden turned to look at me. No. I was surprised. He always said, I'm fine no matter what was going on. But not today. What happened? I asked, taking a step closer. Zayden looked into my eyes. Your diary. It's haunting me, Charlie. I try to sleep, and those lines keep running through my mind. I try to work, and I hear your words echoing. This isn't normal. My heart was breaking and soaring at the same time. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, Zayden said sharply. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. I held my breath. Okay, if I told you that I feel something too? Something, he paused, struggling to find the right words. Would you believe me? My mind went blank. Was he really saying what I thought he was saying? You? What? Zayden moved closer to me. So close that if I took a breath, our chests would touch. Your diary showed me a mirror, and in that mirror I saw myself how I look at you. How I can't focus without you around. How your presence gives me comfort. This had to be a dream. This couldn't be real. But Zayden's touch, when he placed his hand on my cheek, that was real. Warm and firm. I was scared, Zayden continued. Because I'm your boss. Because workplace relationships are complicated. Because I didn't know if you still felt the same way. But your diary told me, Mem. So what now? I asked, my voice shaking. Zayden looked into my eyes and said softly, now I'm asking you, are you willing to take this risk with me? Risk. He was right. This was a risk. But with Zayden standing this close, with that intensity in his eyes that I had always wanted to see, the risk felt worth it. Yes, I said. I want to. And in that moment, Zayden kissed me, soft and slow, like he was confirming that all of this was real. And I kissed him back, because finally, my fantasies were becoming reality. The kiss felt like everything I had imagined and nothing like I expected all at once. It was gentle but desperate, tender but hungry. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard, staring at each other like we couldn't quite believe what had just happened. I've been thinking about this for weeks, Zayden admitted, his voice rough. Ever since I read that diary, I kept telling myself it was wrong, that I shouldn't feel this way about my assistant. But Charlie, I can't stop. I don't want to stop. My legs felt weak. I gripped the edge of his desk for support. How long? I asked. How long have you felt this way? Zayden ran a hand through his hair. A gesture I had learned meant he was anxious. Longer than I want to admit. Your diary it gave me permission to acknowledge what I'd been denying. That I look forward to seeing you every morning. That I find excuses to keep you late just so I don't have to be alone. That I notice everything about you, what you're wearing. How you take your coffee, the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. I felt tears prickling at my eyes. I thought you hated me after reading the diary. I thought you were punishing me by making me work so closely with you. I was punishing myself, Zayden corrected. Testing my own self-control. Trying to prove that I could be near you and not give in to what I was feeling. But I failed. Spectacularly. He reached for me again, pulling me closer. This time the kiss was deeper, more confident. His hands moved to my waist and I wrapped my arms around his neck, pressing against him like I was trying to merge us into one person. Every fantasy I had written about seemed pale in comparison to the reality of being in Zayden's arms. When we broke apart again, reality started to creep back in. What does this mean? I asked. For us? For work? Zayden's expression grew serious. It means we have to be careful. Very careful. We can't let anyone at the office know, at least not yet. The company has strict policies about relationships between supervisors and subordinates. If HR finds out, one of us will have to transfer departments or leave entirely. The thought of leaving made my chest tighten with panic. I don't want to leave, and I don't want you to, Zayden said firmly. So we keep this between us. At work, we're professional. Outside of work, he smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Outside of work, you're mine. The possessiveness in his voice sent shivers down my spine. I can do that, I promised. I'm good at keeping secrets. I kept this one for 2 years. That's another thing, Zayden said, his thumb tracing my jawline. 2 years, Charlie? You felt this way for 2 years and never said anything? I felt my cheeks heat up. You're my boss. You're successful, confident, way out of my league. What was I supposed to do? Walk up and tell you that I spend my nights fantasizing about you? Yes, Zayden said simply. That's exactly what you should have done. We could have had 2 more years together. The regret in his voice matched what I was feeling. 2 years of longing, of secret glances, of late nights where we could have been doing so much more than just working. 2 years wasted because we were both too afraid to take the risk. We'll make up for lost time, I said, surprising myself with my boldness. Zayden's eyes darkened with promise. Yes, we will. He kissed me again, and this time I let myself get lost in it completely. No more holding back, no more pretending, no more writing fantasies in a diary when I could be living them instead. This was real. Zayden was real. And whatever happened next, we would face it together. When I finally left his office that evening, my lips were swollen and my heart was full. I caught my reflection in the elevator doors, and hardly recognized the man staring back at me. He looked happy. Genuinely, completely happy. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe. But as I drove home, a small voice of worry whispered in my mind. Keeping this secret wouldn't be easy, and if anyone found out, the consequences could be devastating. I pushed the thought away, choosing to focus instead on the memory of Zayden's lips on mine, his hands in my hair, his words echoing in my head. You're mine. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them. Because having Zayden was worth any risk. 2 months passed. Zayden and I were in a secret relationship, and each day was becoming more difficult. At the office we tried to maintain professionalism, but at home, whether at his apartment or my small flat, we were completely different people. Real, vulnerable, happy, but happiness never lasts long. Barrett Lane, Zayden's business rival and a senior manager, was becoming increasingly suspicious of us. He always noticed the proximity between Zayden and me. Our eye contact during meetings, the lunch breaks that coincidentally happened at the same time. One Friday evening as I was leaving the office, Barrett stopped me in the parking lot. Charlie, got a minute? He said, his tone friendly but his eyes showing something else. Yeah? I became slightly alert. Do you know what Zayden's family is like? Barrett asked suddenly. I was confused. What do you mean? Barrett leaned against his car. His parents are very conservative. Old money. Traditional values. They don't approve of these modern relationships. Especially when it comes to their son's career. My heart sank. Barrett knew. How? We had been so careful. I don't know what you're talking about, I tried to defend myself. Barrett smiled, but it was a threatening smile. Don't lie. I know. And soon everyone will know. Unless what? Anger crept into my voice. Unless you leave on your own. Quietly. Don't give Zayden any explanation. Just disappear. Otherwise, I'll tell his parents everything. And you know what they'll do? They'll remove Zayden from the company. They'll cut off his inheritance. Because of you, his entire life will be ruined. I felt like someone had ripped open my chest. This was blackmail. Cruel and calculated. But Barrett was also right. I couldn't ruin Zayden's life. His career, his family, his future, everything was at stake. And me? I was just an assistant. Easily replaceable. That night I was with Zayden. But I couldn't tell him anything. He noticed I was quiet, but when he asked, I said I was just tired. A lie. But how could I tell him the truth? That I was thinking about leaving him? The weight of Barrett's threat pressed down on me constantly over the next few days. Every moment with Zayden felt bittersweet, like I was already mourning what I was about to lose. When we were together at his apartment, wrapped in each other's arms, I memorized every detail, the way his hair fell across his forehead when he was relaxed, the sound of his laugh, the warmth of his skin against mine. You seem distracted, Zayden observed one evening, as we were having dinner. Is everything okay at work? Is someone giving you trouble? The irony of his question almost made me laugh. If only he knew. No, everything's fine. I lied smoothly. Just tired, I guess. But Zayden wasn't convinced. He reached across the table and took my hand. Charlie, we promised to be honest with each other. If something's wrong, you can tell me. I wanted to tell him. God, I wanted to tell him everything. But the thought of what Barrett would do, destroying Zayden's relationship with his family, costing him his position at the company his grandfather had built. I couldn't do that to him. Zayden had already taken such a huge risk by being with me. I couldn't let him lose everything else too. I promise I'm fine, I said, squeezing his hand. Just a lot on my mind. That night, as Zayden slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed with another message from Barrett. 2 days left, Charlie. Make your choice. I looked at Zayden's peaceful face in the darkness. He looked younger when he slept. Less guarded. This man had chosen me despite all the risks. Despite the complications. He had kissed me and told me I was his. Had shared his private thoughts and vulnerable moments with me. And now I was going to break his heart. But it was the only way to save him from a worse fate. If his parents found out about us and reacted the way Barrett predicted, Zayden would lose not just me but his entire legacy. At least this way, he would still have his career, his family's support, his future. He would hate me, but he would be okay. Eventually. The next day at work was torture. Every time Zayden smiled at me, every casual touch as he passed by my desk, every moment of our secret communication through glances across the room, they all felt like goodbye. I was already grieving a loss that hadn't happened yet. Want to come over tonight? Zayden asked quietly when we were alone in his office. I almost said yes. I almost told him everything right then. But Barrett's words echoed in my mind. His entire life will be ruined. I can't tonight, I said, hating myself. I have some things to take care of. Zayden looked disappointed but nodded. Tomorrow then? Yeah. I lied. Tomorrow. That evening I sat at my small kitchen table and began writing a letter. My hand shook as I tried to find words that would push Zayden away without explaining why. Words that would make him angry enough not to fight for us. Words that would set him free. I'm sorry, this was a mistake. I can't do this anymore. Short. Simple. Final. I folded the letter and sealed it in an envelope, then wrote my resignation letter to HR. Both letters sat on my table like death sentences, waiting for Monday morning. I spent the weekend alone, ignoring Zayden's calls and texts. Each notification felt like a knife twisting in my gut. He was worried, confused, probably thinking I was having second thoughts. And I was, but not the kind he imagined. Sunday night, Zayden showed up at my door. I didn't answer. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, listening to him knock, hearing him call my name. Every instinct screamed at me to open the door, to fall into his arms and tell him everything. But I couldn't. For his sake, I had to be strong enough to let him go. Finally he left, and I broke down completely, sobbing into my hands, mourning the loss of the best thing that had ever happened to me. Monday morning came too soon. With robot-like movements, I got dressed, picked up both letters and drove to the office. My heart was numb. This was the right thing to do. This was the only thing to do. I submitted my resignation to HR first, citing personal reasons for my immediate departure. Then I walked to Zayden's office. He wasn't there yet. I placed the letter on his desk, right where he would see it, and walked out without looking back. I made it to the parking lot before my resolve cracked. Tears streamed down my face as I got into my car. This was it. It was over. I had saved Zayden from Barrett's blackmail. protected his future, and destroyed my own happiness in the process. But at least he would be okay. And that had to be enough. For 3 days I pretended to deliberate. Barrett sent me threatening messages daily. "Time's running out, Charlie. Make your decision." I finally made my choice. I would leave Zayden. For his happiness. For his future. I wrote a letter explaining nothing. Because if I explained, he wouldn't let me go. I simply wrote, "I'm sorry. This was a mistake. I can't do this anymore." Monday morning I went to the office, submitted my resignation letter to HR, and left that note in Zayden's cabin before walking away. I didn't look at him. If I had, I might have changed my mind. But I didn't make it home. Zayden's car was parked outside my apartment building. And he was inside my living room. Apparently my landlord had given him a key. "What the hell is this?" Zayden was shouting, holding the letter in his hand. "A mistake? Why are you suddenly saying all this?" I turned my face away. I can't do this. All of this, it's wrong." Zayden came over and grabbed my shoulders. "Look at me. And tell me the truth. What happened?" I broke down. Tears started falling. And I told him everything. Barrett's blackmail, the threat about his parents, all of it. Zayden's face turned red with anger. "You really think I'd let you go? Because of my parents?" Zayden cupped my face in his hands. "Charlie, listen. I don't want my family's money. I don't want their company. I just want you. But your future, my future is with you." Zayden interrupted. "I'll start my own company. It'll be small, but it'll be mine. And you'll be with me. Understand?" My crying intensified. "You're doing all this for me?" "Yes." Zayden kissed my forehead. "Because I love you, you idiot." It was the first time he had said it. And I couldn't believe it was real. The declaration hung in the air between us. More powerful than anything written in my diary. Zayden loved me. Actually loved me. Not just wanted me or was attracted to me. But loved. The word I had been too afraid to even write down in my private thoughts was now out in the open. Spoken with such conviction that it shattered all my carefully constructed reasons for leaving. "Say something," Zayden urged when I remained silent, his hands still cradling my face. "Tell me you haven't already decided to throw us away." "I love you too," I whispered, the words feeling both foreign and completely natural. "I've loved you for so long that I don't remember what it feels like not to love you. That's why I was leaving, because I love you too much to watch you lose everything because of me." Zayden pulled me into his chest, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Don't you ever make decisions about us without talking to me first. We're a team now, Charlie. Whatever comes, we face it together." The next 2 months were absolute chaos. Zayden confronted his parents. And they did exactly what Barrett had predicted. They removed him from the family company and cut off his inheritance. The conversation, from what Zayden told me later, had been brutal. His father had called me a distraction and an embarrassment. His mother had cried and accused Zayden of throwing away generations of legacy for a fling with an employee. But Zayden stood his ground. He told them that I wasn't a fling, that he was building a life with me whether they approved or not. He walked away from millions of dollars and a guaranteed position of power because he chose me. Starting his own consulting firm was terrifying. We worked from my tiny apartment at first because Zayden couldn't afford proper office space. There were days when we had more rejections than leads, when potential clients dismissed us because Zayden no longer had his family name backing him. We ate cheap takeout and worked 16-hour days, fueled by coffee and stubborn determination. Barrett tried to spread rumors about why Zayden had really left the family company. But Zayden handled it with a grace I admired. He never badmouthed his parents or the company. He simply focused on building something new, something honest, something that was entirely his own creation. I worked alongside him every step of the way. Not as his assistant anymore, but as his equal. We made decisions together, celebrated small victories together, and picked each other up when the weight of what we'd sacrificed threatened to crush us. There were hard moments. Nights when Zayden would wake up from nightmares about failing, about me leaving him because he could no longer provide the life he thought I deserved. I would hold him and remind him that I never wanted the money or the prestige. I just wanted him. And there were moments when I felt guilty for being the reason he'd lost his family. Zayden would always counter by saying I was the reason he'd found himself, that he had been living someone else's dream before, and now he was finally living his own. Slowly, painfully, the business began to grow. Zayden's talent and reputation couldn't be denied, even without his family name. Clients who cared more about results than pedigree started coming to us. We hired our first employee, then our second. We moved into a real office space, small and modest, but ours. A year after Zayden had walked away from everything, his consulting firm was not just surviving but thriving. We had a solid client base, a growing team, and a reputation for delivering excellent work. Zayden had proven that he was more than just his family name. One evening, he called me into what had become his private office. I walked in to find candles lit and 2 glasses of champagne waiting. "What's this?" I asked, smiling. "This," Zayden said, pulling out a document, "is me making you my official business partner. Equal share, equal say, equal everything. You've earned it, Charlie. This company exists because you stood by me when I had nothing." I stared at the partnership papers, tears blurring my vision. "Zayden, there's one more thing," he said, and suddenly he was down on one knee pulling a simple silver ring from his pocket. "I know we can't legally marry everywhere yet, and I know this isn't some grand romantic gesture with rose petals and a string quartet, but Charlie, you are the best decision I've ever made. You're my partner in every sense of the word. Will you make it official?" I didn't even have to think about it. Yes. 1,000 times yes. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I thought about that diary, the one that had started everything. I had burned it months ago in a symbolic gesture of moving forward. But maybe I had been wrong to destroy it. That diary had been honest and brave in ways I hadn't been in real life. It had forced a confrontation that changed everything. Because of those written fantasies, I now had a reality better than anything I could have imagined. I had Zayden's love, his partnership, his unwavering commitment. I had a career I was proud of and a future I was excited about. "I love you," I told Zayden as he stood and pulled me into his arms. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for being worth choosing," he replied and kissed me like we had all the time in the world. Because now we did. The diary was gone, but the story it had started was just beginning. And this time we were writing it together.